And welcome everybody, and turn the meeting over to Chris for an introduction.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Androsky, current chair of UMEIT USA. And today I am excited that we are going to welcome Kristen Opalinski to our UMEIT Zoom call. Kristen is manager for the ecumenical and religious or interreligious relations for the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. She is a delightful person to talk with, and I would encourage you to do so if you ever get the chance. She travels often and is adventurous when she does, which makes her a really wonderful storyteller as well. So I'm grateful that she's with us today. As you probably already know, the ELCA and the United Methodist Church have been full communion partners since 2009. And the relationships that we hold with one another are extremely important in the unity of the church. This past week, the ELCA was gathered for their church-wide assembly, and we've invited Kristen to be with us today to talk about that gathering, to share with us some of the work that they were engaging in at the assembly, and also to talk about the implications of that ministry for ecumenism. So welcome, Kristen. I'm going to invite you to jump right in, and then if there is time at the end of our session, we'll open it up for questions, or people can type questions into the chat, and I'll keep an eye on that as well. So welcome, Kristen. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Chris and Jean. Thank you for the invitation to come and speak with you. If you hear some noise in the background, I'm at my family's cottage this week as a bit of a time of respite after the churchwide assembly. So you may hear the coffee machine brewing and the dog running around and things like that. So just to make you all aware, but thank you for having me today, and thank you so much for all of the thoughts and prayers that you offered up for us as the ELCA, especially last week during what was a really inspiring but also very challenging week for us as a church. And I will touch on some of the highlights of that in this session. As well as, some of the things related specifically to our day for ecumenical and interreligious guests, which was the Thursday time together. And we'll welcome any questions you may have. And if I don't have the answers, of course, I'm happy to find out who does. So it was a really, as you can imagine, in the midst of kind of a resurgence of COVID with numbers going up. It was even before anything happened during the week, it was already a very tense time to come together. And, we were very nervous heading into it. But from what I've heard, we had about 23 confirmed positive cases, which out of 825 or so participants, I think it could have been a lot worse, although of course we're still waiting to hear, are there others that other cases that come forward. But unfortunately, one of those positive cases was our presiding bishop on Friday. So she was not able to be with the assembly the final day. And so she's doing a lot better now. She actually just led, right before I came on this call, we had our convocation, our post-assembly convocation, and she was well enough to lead us in that. So she is on the mend, but certainly prayers for those 23 who did test positive during the week would be appreciated. And we learned a lot with this assembly on so many levels. Our first major event back as a church. Thank you, Jean. Our first major event back as a church since the pandemic. We were going to have a youth gathering earlier this summer, and that was canceled or postponed for a couple of years down the road. And so this was really our first time to gather again as a church. And as we all know, not only were the pandemic of COVID felt and experienced during these last couple of years, but also many other pandemics of inequality, of racism, of injustices that our churches are responding to daily in the midst of all this. And so the tone of the assembly was very much one of lament and of holding all of those converging pandemics in that space, and the ways in which some of those other pandemics have become very clear within our church and have raised their ugly heads, if you will, within our church structures as well. And so I know that a lot of the information I share you may not be familiar with, and so I'll try my best where I can to give as much background as possible, although for some of the information we would need a week or more together to give you the proper background. So but I just wanted to lift up a couple of areas that were highlights or you know, moments that were really impactful during the week. We elected our first Asian American vice president. Imran Siddiqui became the first vice president of Asian descent for the ELCA, and that position is the highest office that a layperson can hold within the ELCA. And so he comes from the Southeastern Synod of the ELCA. He's based in Atlanta. And he was, prior to this election, he had been serving as the vice president of that synod. And so some of you may know Bishop Strickland through various work that we do together. And so, yes, I think he was thrilled for this election and Imran's opportunity to serve the larger church. But of course, it was a loss for the Southeastern Synod in the process. But all I can just say, all the candidates were phenomenal. The last three candidates in particular really represented, I thought, a really diverse and rich parts of our church. We would have been blessed to have any one of the three of them in that role. And so it really, people just kept having conversations throughout the week of how blessed we felt to be as a church to have so many strong candidates who all would have done a tremendous job in leading this church in this role. So we're thrilled for Imran and look forward to his continued ministry in this role. The voting members considered a memorial urging support for the Land Back movement. And in the end, we approved a memorial for encouraging ELCA members and entities to support creative programs for restorative justice in partnership with our Indigenous siblings. And so this will include anything from returning land to appropriate Native American nations or groups of people when selling or transferring property, but it also encourages a lot more of exploring ways that each of our congregations can focus on developing land acknowledgements and making them a part of our public gatherings, of educating ourselves and our congregations, and at the synod level and church-wide level as well, about the various ways in which Indigenous peoples whose land we inhabit, we can further develop our relationships with those people who are, in many cases, already a part of the church fabric of the ELCA. And so this really helps to set the table for further conversation on this, and for many ways in which we as a church can expand those commitments. And so one of the key aspects of all of this came we had a declaration of the ELCA to American Indian and Alaska Native people, which was formally adopted in the fall of last year. But this year, Assembly gave us the opportunity to lift that up for the first time publicly as a church. And so that was a part of this assembly as well, was lifting up that declaration. And as a part of that time together, we also welcomed, this was on Wednesday, we welcomed President Fawn Sharp, who is the president of the National Congress of American Indians. She came and gave an address to the assembly, which was just a deep honor for us as a church, to host her, to receive that message from her, and to have it be at a time when we were lifting up this declaration. Some other highlights that are important to note is that there was a large conversation related to revisions around our human sexuality, gift, and trust social statement, which came out in 2009, was adopted in 2009. And this is one of the areas where we don't have a lot of time to get into the nuances of what this means, but it was pushed forward to form a group that would start considering a revision process for that 2009 document. In particular, the motion that was brought forward was related to what we call our 4 positions of bound conscience, expressed in that social statement. And so for those of you not familiar with this particular social statement, when the statement was passed in 2009, it allowed for the holding of very diverse opinions on the stance of human sexuality related to the welcome of LGBTQ plus clergy, yes, rostered ministers, yes, but also even the way in which a particular congregation expresses themselves, whether they are a affirming and welcoming congregation versus one that is self-proclaimed as more conservative. And so has been, over the last decade, a lot of concern over the fact that all of this wide range of understanding is being held in tension. You know, us Lutherans love to hold a lot of things in tension with each other, and this is a perfect example of that. But there's been a lot of pressure, and rightly so, I would say, to relook at this, to reevaluate what does it mean that when we as a church lift up a social statement in this way, and what can we do to take perhaps a firmer stance in the area of welcome related to these kinds of very challenging social statements. So again, there are so many more layers to that and the conversations that are being had related to that than we have time for this morning. But I certainly would be happy to follow up with any further questions, especially understanding the journey that you all are on currently as a church. One of the other kind of primary areas that was voted on that will have a significant impact on our church moving forward is that we are looking at forming now a commission that will look at a reconstituting process for the ELCA. So one of the major memorial stances that was actually taken by 9 synods total in various forms. Just to give you some background into how our memorials come to our churchwide assemblies, synods develop various memorials within their leadership, their congregations. Congregations can develop memorials or work with other congregations to bring forward to a synod assembly. And then in that synod assembly, it's voted upon by the synod assembly which memorials then move on to the churchwide assembly. And so through that process this last year, we had 9 memorials that moved forward from the synod assemblies to the churchwide assembly related to a restructuring of the governance of the ELCA in some way, shape, or form. And so what came out of our time in Columbus last week was a focus on forming a commission that will essentially frame what that would look like, what that process would look like, to then make those findings and recommendations make them presented to the 2025 churchwide assembly in preparation for what would be a reconstituting convention. So as far as our timeline, the next 3 years will be the kind of the research evaluation side of it. And then those findings will be brought to Phoenix, which is where our next ELCA churchwide assembly. If you want to visit us in Phoenix in August, let me know. It's going to be a very hot churchwide assembly. But in 2025, that's when those findings will be brought forward, and then the potential reconstituting convention that would follow would come after that. So that's kind of the timeline that we're looking at. And it will become, I think, a really pivotal moment for our church. The other thing I just wanted to lift up quickly before I go into some of the specifics of our Thursday, which was our ecumenical and interreligious day, was the very public apology statement to the Santa Maria Peregrina congregation, which again, I don't have a ton of time. I know a lot of you have been following what has been going on in the Sierra Pacific Synod in California from December until now, with the dismissal of the pastor of this congregation, which renamed itself because when the pastor was dismissed by the Bishop of Sierra Pacific at the time, they were essentially dissolved as a mission center for that synod. And so they renamed themselves, and the pastors continued to assist that community in navigating the past 7 months, 8 months. But for those of you who don't know, that removal happened on the feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe on December 12th, and many of unleashed this number of events that led to forming a group to go out and research and inquire from the office of the presiding bishop to the Sierra Pacific Synod, which led to Bishop Eaton requesting the resignation of the Bishop of Sierra Pacific Synod at that time, Megan Rohr. And this then flowed into the Sierra Pacific Synod Assembly, which was a very tense time. And again, so many layers of nuance that we just don't have the time to unpack now. But essentially, Bishop Rohr, former Bishop Rohr, did end up resigning. We're currently in the process between the ELCA Churchwide office, the office of the presiding bishop, and our Latine Association of the ELCA are working with the community currently to find ways to help reestablish them as a community of the ELCA, and carry out a specified investigation that hopefully will lead to a very just and outcome that is rooted in the truth that's present within that whole situation, and will lead to a reconciliation process of that community and its pastor to the larger church. And so part of a first step of this process was Bishop Eaton developing an apology to the community itself. And so we had 4 members of the community come to Columbus to receive this public apology on behalf of the entire church to the community, and the community then also gave a response to the apology. And so this was done on Tuesday afternoon in a non-legislative session. It was a session that stood on its own, which was unprecedented to hold a session like that. And we really hope that this will be the very first step of many in helping to rekindle and heal many of the wounds that have taken place over the last 8-9 months, and hopefully be a first step on a process towards healing and reconciliation between the church as a whole, the ELCA as a whole, and Iglesia Luterana Santa Maria Peregrina congregation. I think I'll just move very quickly into the EIR, the Ecumenical and Interreligious. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm just seeing now that we're out of time.
No, go ahead, keep going, Kristen.
Okay.
You're okay, keep going.
Okay, I'll speed this up. I'm so sorry. Thursday, we welcomed 18 ecumenical and interreligious guests into our midst, including Bishop Sally Dick. It was wonderful having her there with us and representing you all in that moment. We honored their presence on stage, and then we heard from 6 of the leaders, including our 3 formula of agreement representatives who were there. Each of them spoke briefly, and so we were highlighting the 25th anniversary of the formula of agreement. We also heard from Bishop Dennis Madden from the Roman Catholic Church, as we recently concluded our most recent round of dialogue with the Roman Catholics, and are just getting prepared for our next round. And so we also had the interim president from the National Council of Churches with us, Bishop McKenzie, also sharing her insights on the NCC and where we're moving together within that framework. And there's some other highlights as well that I would have loved to have shared had I kept a tighter, focus on the time and not gotten into the weeds on some of those issues. But I'm very sorry that we don't have time for questions. I know you have other work to do, but thank you for this opportunity, and sorry to
Kristen,
No,
it's
run into
really
that
okay.
wall.
We very, very, very much appreciate you sharing with us and taking the time. It was very interesting, and thank you. And so simply, if anybody has questions, I'll just forward them to you, Kristen. So,
Perfect.
It's all good.
Hopefully that gave you a snapshot.
Yeah. And since we are full communion partners, we thought it was important to hear about what's going on with our full communion partner, knowing that there are so many similarities, and yet you all are cutting edge on a few things that we're not quite there yet. So it's good to hear. So thank you.